All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I am Ryan Evans with the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And this is, of course, part of our regular Thursday webinar series. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be looking at ag succession planning and current thoughts and lessons learned. And we are pleased to have with us to share some of his knowledge and expertise, Nebraska Extension educator Allan Vyhnalek, who today will draw on his over 40 years of experience to share lessons learned from working with farm and ranch families as they have worked on succession and transition planning. So we're hoping today you can walk away with some tools for good communication strategies for families as they look to successfully transfer their operations. And as always, if you have any questions as we go for Allan, please feel free to put those in the chat box or in the Q&A. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Allan.
Thanks so much, Ryan. You can hear me okay, correct?
Yep, sounds great.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, so I got the title slide up here, and I have changed my lesson here a little bit, and we had an opening on the schedule to do this, and so I thought, well, it's a good time to throw my latest thoughts in here before spring field work begins. Here's how to get a hold of me: my email address, my phone number, and then the web page that I have my stuff posted at. So even if you have so, here's my point: if you have someone else that would you'd like to have hear anything I've got to say, you go to that web page, and there's webinars already recorded on there. A couple of them from last year, late February, early March, that would be good to use. And then Ryan helped me with a 12 segment series that I did about 2.5 years ago. That's still all valid, and that could be looked at too. And the nice thing about the 12 segments is it breaks it down into 8 to 10 minute segments and does a good job. As today, I'm actually recording this or I'm speaking with you live from Columbus, Nebraska. So just understand that I may not be in my office like I'm not today. And so please leave a message. If you call the office, just leave a voicemail message, because it'll come to me no matter where I'm at. I'll check my voicemail. As a matter of fact, on email right now before I leave Columbus and come back to Lincoln. So that's what I would say about that. We're going to discuss why we don't plan, the need for planning, the steps we could use for planning. And I've changed that order a little bit, changed my thoughts on that a little bit. Communication is the most important part of any estate plan. If you talk to a lawyer, talk to ag bankers, talk to anybody that works with farm and ranch families, it's either bad communication or no communication that messes things up. And I'm going to talk a little bit about negotiation strategies at the end. So are people planning to retire? Well, actually, just the latest survey results I could find, and just under 20% never plan to retire from farming. This is of Iowa farmers done a couple of years ago, and just over 50% only plan to just semi-retire. So that's well over 70% of Iowa farmers never fully plan to get out of farming. And I think the numbers would be very similar to Nebraska if I had a nice sample size on my survey too. Most farmers, us boomers, I'm a boomer too. Most farmers that are boomers never really plan to ever quit. Why are we retiring or at a later age or only semi-retiring? Well, because they have a difficult time giving up control of the farm. To be true for the boomers, it was all about working hours and control. And in some cases, we don't even have control yet. I mean, I know boomers in their 60s that still have parents in the late 80s and early 90s that are still kind of in control. So if you want to have any control, then you're going to keep it longer, because when you finally get it, you may be relatively late in life. And so you better think about how you're going to do that, how you're going to handle that. Modern farm equipment allows them to farm longer, push a button at the end of the field, takes you across, turn around, push the button, it takes you back. Relate retirement to own mortality, so you don't want to think about death. So, you don't want to think about retiring either. The bad news is that when I did this survey, some felt that they couldn't afford to retire. The good news is that they were having healthier, longer lives, so they were no reason to retire. Just over half, or about half, don't have a successor. So why would I quit when I have no one to take over? And just over half don't know what else they do. They didn't do hobbies because they never had time. They don't necessarily go out much. They haven't done much travel. Some of them, they just don't know what else they do. So why would they give it up? So all these reasons come into play when it comes to why people are not retiring. However, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone into retirement. Let's just put that term away right now. I'm not going to talk to you about retirement anymore, because you're not going to retire anyway. The lesson must center on the idea, which is no one avoids the pine box. What happens to your stuff when you're gone? This is not a talk about retirement. It's a talk about your demise and what happens to your stuff when you're not around anymore, because you're not going to retire. And I'm not asking you to retire. what's going to happen to your stuff? That's what you got to figure out. Because what tends to happen is people put off this discussion about what should happen. If families experience difficulty discussing the future of the family farm, more often than not, planning tends to be deferred until some critical life event occurs, which forces the family to address the matter. So what that study shows, and it's true, and this is one and done in Australia, but quite honestly, it's true in the United States too. The bottom line is we're going to wait till somebody passes away or has a significant health issue and then start talking about what happens with the farm in terms of estate planning. I think that's just really kind of not a good advice, because we're going to wait until we have grief and sorrow and sadness, and then we're going to have a family discussion about what happens to the farm next when that matriarch or patriarch is gone. I say, no, let's do it now before those things happen, before we have those catastrophic events occur in our family or in our lives, and we can have a better discussion about it. It'll just be a cleaner discussion without all the grief, without all the sadness, without all the sorrow. Let's do it now, get it done ahead of that time of experiencing that loss in our life. We don't plan because it's complicated. It's mental work to us. And to be true, if I go talk to a lawyer and they start throwing around terms and all the stuff that has to do with estate planning, they can plug the cylinder of the brain. So just make sure you're kind of on top of that and know what you're up against there. It is different line of thinking than what we're used to thinking about. And I've already talked about the mortality issue, but the other thing I'm running into a fair amount is that people are afraid to put a plan together right now, because if we do something, if I put a plan together today, it'll be wrong at some point in time in the future. And guess what? If you live long enough, it will be. The bottom line is things change in our life and it could be wrong. But I would submit this, having a plan and having to amend it some point in time in the future, make a change to it, it's way cheaper than not having a plan and having something wrong that could be, tens of 30, 50, $100,000 mistake or more, versus a few $100s to $1,000 or so just to amend a plan. So please have a plan. And if something changes in the future in your family, yeah, you might have to amend or change your plan. That makes sense. So the other thing I want to talk about quick here at the beginning is that near the end of any kind of career, there's 3 types of planning that have to go into this. One of them is the end of life plans and documents. That would be the top circle on this chart. What I'm talking about is I'm in a hospital, or I'm near the end of my life in the hospice, that sort of thing, and I can no longer answer for myself. Who's going to answer for me, or who's going to work with professionals about what's happening with me and my stuff? So one of those forms is the power of attorney for healthcare. The other form is the power of attorney for personal or durable power of attorney, the business power of attorney. And the third thing is the healthcare directive. So I designate somebody that I trust to handle working with the hospital and the doctors on my healthcare. And then I'll designate as another person, or it could be the same person or another person, to handle paying my bills or in those business things. If I cannot pay my own bills or make my own business decisions. And then the third one is the healthcare directive. What instructions am I leaving for my professionals, my health professionals, as far as whether I stay plugged in or not plugged in if I can't answer for myself? And how long does that last? Those kind of things. And the big point I want to make here on this top circle is I think most adults, especially my age, have those forms in place. That's all good. But make sure that everybody over 19, the young people over 19, have those forms in place for themselves too. Because every once in a while you hear stories about the 19, 20, 21-year-old that's been in college or heads back to college and driving. They have a horrible accident. They get hauled to a doctor or hospital, I guess to a hospital facility. The parents rush in to help their son or daughter with the doctor and hospital work. And the parent goes, and the hospital has to go, do you have power of attorney for healthcare for this child? And if they don't have that done, then the hospital will not talk to them about their child's care. And so the bottom line is it's more expensive. It's to enlist an attorney than to have a judge deem the child incompetent or incapable of doing them themselves, and to have somebody else take over. So just make sure that it's just easier to have these things in place. Those are boilerplate forms that lawyers' offices have, and they're not that expensive to get put together and made for everyone in your family that's over the age of 19. The second circle is the lower left circle. It's the estate plan circle. That's the structure you're going to use to make sure that your stuff transfers to the next generation. It's going to be things like a will, or just a simple will, or a will in a trust, or a will in an LLC, or other structures that you could use, a C Corp, an S Corp, anything like that, that would be to help you decide or help you put together the instructions for what happens to your stuff when you're gone. That's what the estate plan is. And then the third circle is the business succession planning. I think this is where we're falling apart in Nebraska a little bit with ag families. The business succession part is what am I putting in place to make sure that my son or daughter, whoever's taking my business over for me, the succession part, has a chance to make it. We have to put in structures like long-term leases or first right of refusal agreements, anything like that with the business operating agreements that we can put in place to make sure that that succeeding son or daughter has a business to succeed to. We have to avoid what happened to us 40 or 50 years ago when we started farming. My age group started farming. If there was 4 kids in a family and I was the on-farm kid, I got 25% when mom and dad passed away, and I had to pay off my brothers and sisters. And typically one or more of them wanted to be paid off. So I had to borrow money and pay off my brothers and sisters. We can't do that to the kids nowadays. If they're one of 4 kids and they just get 25%, I've just put my son or daughter, or whoever's taking over for me, I just put them out of business. The bottom line is cost of land, cost of machinery, all that stuff's too expensive nowadays to put that kind of financial burden on the on-farm kid if we're only going to give them 25%. And so one of my messages is fair equal and is equal fair, especially if you have someone that's put in sweat equity into that operation. There's something every family has to evaluate and know that there's be little differences there. What tends to happen is we don't have a plan at all. And so you realize, hey, I should have a plan. That's step number 1 here. And number 2, I should go to a meeting or meet with a lawyer. Well, I'm just giving you, 45, 50 minutes this noon. So just know that we're getting a kind of a start on it, but we're not really have an official meeting, really, quite honestly. But we realized to start working on this. So we start some thought here. And then number 3, you realize pretty quickly, hey, that's not what I'm used to thinking about. It's complicated. I have to think this through. I have to know what I'm doing. And so you get a headache. And so you just quit working on it. And then it goes right on to step number 4. And you get stuck into step number 4, no action at this time. I'm telling you, 3 weeks to 3 months to 3 years. That could be or longer. How do I know about this? Well, it happened to me too. I mean, I had that original I love you will. The original I love you will says, honey, and we have it at the beginning of our marriage, right? That original I love you will. It said, honey, I love you. And if I'm gone, all my stuff goes to you. And then her will says, honey, I love you. And all your stuff comes back to me. And the third part of that I love you will, that beginning of the marriage will said, we are assigning these people as the guardians of our children if we're both gone. If we're both gone, here's who we want to take care of our kids, 1, 2, 3, 4, those kind of things. So it's just a function of the I love you wills were great and they're necessary for that beginning of the marriage stuff, but they have to be amended, they have to be changed, they have to be fixed. And I knew that I had an old I love you will and I needed to get it fixed. And it took me 4 or 5 years, quite honestly, to get to a lawyer and get this plan put together so we make sure we do it right. So what I suggest, however, is we go to something more sequential and more, in my view, ideal. Hopefully there's not a catastrophic event. Hopefully I should have a plan. I understand I should have a plan. Hopefully not anything bad happening in the family. And then I think the second line down then, as your followed arrow says, I want a complete inventory of my asset, a detailed balance sheet. In other words, what do I have? What's my stuff? And you include everything on there. You include the land on there, the machinery on there, the vehicles on there, the household goods on there, grandma's yellow pie plate that's an antique that came over from Germany or Czechoslovakia or wherever you came from. Any of those antique family heirlooms need to be listed, all those kind of things. And you put down what they're worth, and you put down what you still owe on them and how they're owned. For farmland, it may be owned in a C Corp or an S Corp or a LLC or whatever. You put all that stuff down. Joint tenants with right of survivorship, anything, whatever that happens to be, get that all listed. Get that complete list of going. And then I suggest that you get your family together, not to make any decisions, but you need to have a discussion about what your options are. And what I'm saying by that is I think that the family needs to talk about. Who's interested. I would want to know which kid wants to even consider farming. I would want to know if I redid an antique tractor, I would want to know which kid wants to inherit that antique tractor. Or in the case of my mother-in-law, I want to ask to inherit the grandfather clock that my father-in-law had. And so my name's on the back of the grandfather clock. At some point in time, I'll bring that back to my house. Anything like that. The family meets to find out all those wishes. No decisions made, but just the wishes. Then you go to a lawyer and say, okay, this is kind of what we have. What do you think our options are in terms of options of what we could do with it? Is it just a simple will? Is it a will and trust, will, LLC? And then you get out of that meeting with the lawyer, and then you need to pick something. Some decisions need to be made. And then I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then you go back to the lawyer, get a succession plan written, developed, signed. Congratulations. That's usually the end of it. But then I also suggest that you review periodically, so that as things change, and because they will change, you can amend or change that plan for what happens to your stuff. So make sure you kind of think through this and go through this sequentially. Are you going to get done with this in 3 days or 3 weeks? No, but you can sure do it in 3 to 6 months. And so I'd encourage all of you by the end of summer, by Labor Day, to have a succession plan put together, and celebrate Labor Day by showing your kids what you actually put together, and show them that succession plan. So the lesson here is, I just want everybody to have a plan, because if you don't have a plan, from the calls I get, no plan leads to chaos. And chaos leads to greed, and greed splits families. And what I also run into is that if either there's no plan, or the plan has not been communicated, and if you don't tell the kids what the plan is, and then they find out when they read the will, sometimes that causes the greed, and that causes chaos too. So make sure the communication's there. If you have a will, if you don't have a will, then get one. Because if we have families that start splitting, or families that get greedy, or families that think they're not being treated equitably, they will behave exactly like the video of the monkeys I'm about to show you. So we put 2 monkeys side by side, and we had them perform a task. And as long as they performed the task, they received a piece of, and they each received the same thing. In this case, it was a piece of cucumber. Everything was terrific. Everything was just fine. And then all of a sudden they changed the experiment, and they gave the second monkey a piece of grape. And let's see how that changed what happened with those animals, and what happened, and how they were treated, changed how they behaved. It's about 1.5 minutes long. Maybe not even, maybe it's only a minute long. Here we go.
See what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
So my point is simply this: if we don't tell the kids what's going to happen, or we don't have a plan for what's going to happen, it can lead to chaos. And chaos will cause greed, and greed splits families. And that was the video to demonstrate what will exactly happen to your family if you don't have a plan, or if you haven't communicated your plan. As long as the plan isn't exactly equal, somebody will get their nose out of joint, and you'll have a problem, just like the monkey shaking the cage. So maybe a first conversation regarding an estate plan is just simply this: when you're done, when you sell a family, don't make that assumption, get that commitment. Just know, are we going to do to go through this process? We're still going to have a family when we get done at the end. I think if everybody makes that commitment, I think that the buy-in's better in terms of not causing trouble and not being as greedy. You just have to kind of traverse that. Each family has their own set of issues they have to deal with, and you just have to kind of have that conversation about what that looks like. Secondly, and just as important, probably should flip these two on this chart or on this page, maybe make 2 number 1 and 1 number 2. The thing is just as important is, our mom, dad, or grandpa, grandma, whoever's in charge of the family, are they on the same page? They need to get that worked out first, because I've had situations where dad talked to a son and mom talked to a daughter, and now you've split and they don't agree on what should happen. Now you've got the fight going across 2 generations. That just gets really bad in a big hurry. So make sure you don't have that happening. Get commitment. Get mom and dad on the same page. Don't even start the process. Tell mom and dad decide what's going to happen next, and then you got to get the commitment. The family's going to get along, and don't make that assumption. Get that commitment. So here's some new slides or new ways of reordering my stuff that I haven't done yet. at least for recording. So I'm glad to do this today. And it just says, if I could simplify this for people, here's what I suggest. Number one, what's step number one? What do you have? So this is that list of, I already described this. It's that list of assets, inventory, investments, everything. And I like the Iowa State Ag Decision Maker folder or file, or the information that's on this publication called C4-57, and it's evaluating your estate planning questionnaire, because you list how things are owned, you list any debts against any of those assets, and it's a very complete listing of everything that you have, including investments, everything, money in the bank, vehicles, machinery, land, everything you've got. So do something like this. And the cool thing about C4-57 is that it's a PDF file, and you can fill it out actually on your computer and then print it, and that's what you take to your lawyer. Or if you don't have the computer skills, get somebody to print it for you, and then you can fill it out by hand and take it to a lawyer, so you can prove or show them what you've got. And so in other words, step one, what do you have? Step two, I'd probably take this list of people. I know it's a little bit scary, but I'd probably take this list of people and meet with the family. Again, we're not making decision making. We're just getting input to find who's interested in what. Be sure you have the appropriate people involved. I will have lawyers argue with me on this point, and they're welcome to do that, because they've been at the front line of all this, and they see all the strife and anger that gets brought out when you have a family meeting. And so the lawyers will say, don't do what I'm going to suggest that you do. But I say, mom, dad, grandpa, and grandma, whoever's in charge needs to get their sons and daughters together. And most lawyers will say, stop there. But I also suggest the spouses should be there, because the spouses are the ones that ask all the great questions. Listen, if we want to be a part of a family, if we want to be really included, if we want to feel like we're really a part of a family, I think we need to be listened to. And I'm an in-law too. And so how do I feel like I'm a part of that family? When I get to say stuff, when I ask questions and those kind of things. And so everybody should get that input. Again, this meeting is no decision making. It's only about input. And the grandchildren, a lot of people won't include grandchildren, and I'm fine if you don't. But if you have older grandkids, especially those that are interested in farming or ranching, I would, and if they're mature enough to handle it, I'd probably include them in the conversation so you can hear what they've got to say or what their input is. The bottom line is, and by the way, and they could be as young as 14, 15, 16, they'd handle it fine. But I think some of the grandkids at 20, 22, 24, if they're not mature enough to handle the conversation, they shouldn't be there. So every family has to make their own determination how they want to handle the grandkids. Be sure that you tell people this is only about input. There's no criticizing ideas. Everybody should get to say what they think. And you always have somebody in a family, it seems like, that wants to talk all the time. You have to institute a gag rule to keep them from talking all the time. You have to say, well, we're talking about the North 40. Everybody talks once. While we're talking about the South 80, everybody talks once. And everybody talk about the Western section of grass, everybody can have their input once. And make sure everybody has a chance to input once before anybody gets a second chance. Really important thing to consider. And then probably the next step I would do then is get to the decision-making part to kind of decide how you really want things to really happen in your family. And I would use the golden rule. The golden rule in this case is not what you hear in church, do unto others thing. That's not that one. This golden rule is you has the gold makes the rule. So if that's mom, dad, grandpa, and grandma, they make the decision, whoever it is. It's usually mom, dad, or by themselves, or grandpa and grandma by themselves. But it might include the kids, son, daughter, son, daughter, son, daughter. But it should never include spouses, and absolutely not include grandchildren. You're just going to have a small group, a very small group, small as you can make it, make the decision of what's going to happen with what. Make sure that when this group gets together, that's been majority vote or unanimous vote. This is meetings about decisions. What do you want to do with the stuff that's a part of that family's legacy? That's what I suggest on this family decision making. A lot of people would rather just have mom and dad decide and not tell anybody what's going to happen. And I think that everybody should have input, so I want to amend that just slightly. Step 3, after you have, okay, so we've identified what we have, we've had the family to find out what the family wants to do. Now, in a perfect world, you write down what happens to your stuff. You're going to, what do you want to do with that? After you have the family making a decision making, you're going to write this all down. Am I keeping it? Am I selling it? Am I gifting it? Am I a TOD or POD, transfer on death or pay on death? Or you don't care what happens to certain stuff. That's fine. Every family can have all those decisions as a part of this whole thing. So what do you want to have happen to your stuff? That's the point of step 3. You do not have to decide in step 3 how you're going to make that happen. In other words, I don't have to worry about whether I'm going to have my lawyer write a will or a will on a trust or a will on an LLC. I just know that I want to have my lawyer you to get done what I've written, identified in step 3. This is what I want to happen to my stuff. That's what I'm going to have my lawyer get me to do. And I don't care what tool you use. He has to figure that out to make this work. I want this plan to work this way. And then you get a hold of your tag team, your professional team, to decide what you're going to do. This would be a lawyer, financial planner, transition specialist, banker, insurance agent, tax preparer. And I know that you won't necessarily use all of them all the time, but at some point in time, you need to use some of these people to make sure that your plan makes sense. Like, for instance, if I have a lawyer put together a plan and it's got certain things happening in sales and all these kind of things, or gifts, so that's all happening, I make sure my tax preparer or CPA is a part of that so that I don't get into any tax problems. Just make sure I get that covered. Or I make sure that a financial planner is there too. So if I have investments, that I get them to the right person in my family without having an encumberment on the investment in terms of illegal fees, taxes, anything like that that would screw up that transfer of money on the investment. And if you're moving land, if you're going to keep somebody on the farm, if you're lucky enough to have somebody succeed you, you could use a farm transition specialist to kind of put together the operating rules of the operating agreement for that next generation. A banker, of course, you got to have in part of the loop in case you're trying to, you need to pay them off. They still, or you still owe some money, that sort of thing. And then for the insurance agent, I think that there's some, most people don't like to involve insurance agents because they're always trying to sell insurance. But I think if a farmer is young enough, he could take out, there's certain policies that work really nicely. You can take out a policy on his parents and make himself the beneficiary. Needs the insurance of parents for 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, whatever the number is. And then he gets that payment back to him upon the parent's death. That helps him pay off his brothers and sisters if that's what he needs to do. I think there's some utility to some of that to happen too. So just to understand that's all these people could be a part of your team, but they all need to know what's going on, not just a lawyer. So for this whole thing, this 4-step process, I say avoid that circle of inaction. Don't worry about the tool. Your professional will figure that out. If one of your team is hard to work with or hard to understand, or they want to be a part of the team, find someone else. You can always find a different lawyer. You can always find a different attorney, or a financial planner. You can always find a different somebody. So make sure your team gets along too, and they all know what is happening along with you, and that you can work this out. You just have to make sure, but the communication's there. Okay. Where am I at? Oh yeah, parents make generational assumptions, and sometimes they're good assumptions, and sometimes they're not good assumptions. And I haven't even looked if there's any comments in the comment deal yet, or if there's any questions. No, there are not. So if you have any questions or have anything you want to comment about, you're welcome to put that in either the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be glad to help you with that, especially when we get towards the end of the talk. So parents make several assumptions. Are they right? Yeah, sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. One assumption parents make that I think can go wrong in a hurry is our business only. It does not get shared with anyone. So a lady calls me up. I'm in my office here in Columbus when I used to work here in Columbus, probably a phone call from 6 or 7 years ago. She said, my mom's in a nursing home, and she's actually in the memory care unit or memory care area of the unit or nursing home. She has either dementia or Alzheimer's, probably a little bit of both, obviously, and she can no longer answer for herself. I, being the oldest child, was made the executor of the state or the personal representative for my mom. So I had to take care of the rent. We had the same renter for 30 years. My mom and dad always rented to the same neighbor. Dad's gone. Now mom can't answer for herself, and I don't know how to handle the rent. Talk to me about what I do. And I said, I'll be glad to. I said, so my recommendation is you get out the lease for the farm, and you get that lease out, read it, and then go talk to the tenant and get that all worked out. What's going to happen with the rent? She said, that's the problem, Allan. The problem is there was no written lease. It's all handshake or verbal agreement. Well, that illustrates what I'm trying to say with this first bullet. Our business is our business. It does not get shared with anyone. So our parents were part of that generation that didn't believe that anything gets shared with anyone, and we can't duplicate that. We got to do better than that. So please tell somebody, or please getting in writing, if this were the written lease would be nice, that this information gets shared and we know what's going on there. Bullet number 2 says our kids get along great now. I know that will continue. My point on that is simply this. I think sometimes families get along because the parents are the glue that holds the family together. I've observed families in the past where I've observed families where the kids are disagreeing. They'll bring a parent into that disagreement to have the parent take sides, and that's not helpful either. But the point is, I think parents are the glue. So know that when you're gone, the kids may not get along that great. The third bullet is, I know that my children want to keep this asset in the family even when we're gone. And that's usually will not be the case, even though it's been drilled into some of the kids, especially the older kids. You keep farm ground in the family. That's just what it is. We have a pioneer family farm for 150 years, and we're the fourth generation or fifth generation or sixth generation. We should keep this farm in the family. Well, all the brothers and sisters, for different reasons, will have different values on that. And I've run into too many situations where the values of one of the kids will be, well, listen, I got debt to pay. I got a house to pay off. I've got my children in college. I've got a child getting married. I just need some cash. Please let me use my part of the asset to handle it that way. And so there will always be somebody who wants to cash out. That happens more often than you want to admit. The next bullet says, kids will have to figure out how to divide. I'm not going to do an estate plan. I'll be gone. I don't care what happens. Well, if you want to start the feud with the family where they no longer get together for the holidays, or they no longer get together for baptisms or funerals or wedding celebrations, any of those things, we'll just go with that assumption. The fifth bullet says, since I have 4 children, my assets have to be divided 25% equally to each, because that's the only fair way to do it. That works okay if none of the children have any skin in the game. So, I go back to my same old story on this because it's the best one. A farmer comes up to me at Husker Harvest Days in September here. It's probably been close to 10 years ago now, at least 7 or 8 years ago now. And he says, my dad's been gone for lots of years. My mom passed away in May, and now in August we were reading the will, and my will says that we 4 kids each get 25% each. That's the only equal way to do it, and that's what mom and dad believed. And this guy continues on to say, I'm the on-farm kid. I've been out there in the late 60s, been out there with mom and dad for 50 years, ever since he got out of high school, and he was only getting his 25%. In other words, the argument is he's been out there doing the sweat equity with mom and dad, taking care of the farm exclusively since dad passed away, doing 100% of the work for his mom, and he's only going to get his 25%. Well, I'm trying to say there is sometimes equal is not fair, and fair is not equal. So just every family has to evaluate that for themselves, but just make sure that you have that thought through before you start splitting assets. And then someday this will all be yours. It's unless you have a signed land deed for part of the land. That's probably not. I mean, you probably get to split it 4 ways. That's what happened to the guy in the previous bullet. His dad kept telling him, "Someday, son, this will all be yours." Well, yeah, it was all 25% his. So you just have to. That can be a good or a bad plan. So just make sure that you avoid some of these assumptions that can go awry for you. Just do better than that. So the main part of my lesson is simply this: when I think that a lot of Nebraska families get along great, I think the majority of Nebraska families get along great. And then there's some families that just have stuff going the heck in the handbasket. And I think it's a small percent. I think it's 8, 10, 12%. And guess which families call me? It's these 10% that've had the problems. They're the ones that'll call me. I'll get those phone calls. And when I analyze those phone calls carefully, the problem is not with not knowing what to do or not being able to farm well. The problem is we've either had no communication or very much a lack of communication on what's supposed to happen and what did happen. And so you have this misunderstanding, this argument, if you will, because they didn't communicate or they communicated very poorly. So my point is simply this: if we're going to communicate well, we have to listen carefully to each other. And it's listening, not talking, that'll work for the communication. Make sure that you have proven to the other party, your brother or sister in this case, that you've heard what they said. And you have to do that by repeating what you thought you heard them say, and make sure, did I hear you say that? And then you repeat back to them what they said. No matter what the discussion is, just get yourself into the practice of communicating well. And then also ask clarifying questions. I was talking to a guy the other day. He said, I was eating and I found a good supper in West Point. And I said, okay, so where'd you go in West Point? He named the name of the place. And I said, so So what did you like there? And he named the type of food. And I said, so tell me where this place is at. I want to go there next time. I like that kind of food too. And so he described in what part of town it was at and how to get there. And it's not a place I'd ever been before. So I'm kind of excited to go to West Point now and check that out in terms of a place to eat. But my point is, I never said anything about what I was going to do that evening for supper. All I did is ask more questions about what they were doing for supper and what they like to eat and where they like to eat and where was that place at and all those kind of things, because I'm asking clarifying questions. And so my point is, he felt appreciated, he felt listened to, he felt valued. And I think that's what we have to break. Those are the kinds of things we have to break through if we're going to have good communication with someone in our family about what's going to happen with the assets, what's going on next. Communicate with non-local family. If you're going to have someone have some of this discussion, and you got somebody that's not close, lives in a different community far away, like Minneapolis or Chicago or Milwaukee or St. Louis or something like that, do you make them come back necessarily for a family meeting? No. But I sure put them on a speakerphone through a cell phone, or just put them on a Zoom call or something like that to make this all work out, because they need to hear what's going on too. I'm doing one family meeting with a family where the on-farm kids were in the room and the parents were in the room, and there was one brother that was not a part of that. So they hooked him up by a cell phone on speakerphone, and he asked some great questions, never to challenge what was going to happen, but just so he would understand. And so I think that's important to have non-local family part of this discussion. And be careful of sweetheart deals. I think that we have to understand that when that on-farm kid seems like he's getting a great deal, we have to ask more questions. We have to find out, why do you think he's getting such a great deal on rent, or why he gets such a great deal on purchasing, or whatever. And it might be, he's getting a great deal on rent because he's the one that bought the bulldozer to go knock the trees down so the pivot could go all the way around. And maybe he never turns a bill in to mom and dad for the pivot repair. Maybe he just takes care of that or himself. Or maybe if he lives at the house on the farm, even though mom and dad should be supplying some of the roofing materials or new windows and new siding, maybe the on-farm kid's just taking care of that. And maybe the on-farm kid and his wife have been taking care of mom and dad throughout all those decades, where they were going from the farm to the nursing home to the nursing home assisted living, and into hospice and all the medical appointments. Maybe the on-farm people the local people were taking care of all that. Maybe those sweetheart deals aren't such sweetheart deals if you consider everything that's going on. And then I think that the younger generations obviously require better communication of what we received, especially when it comes to that point that I made a couple of minutes ago about, our family value is that we don't share information with anyone. I think we have to tell the kids what's going to happen. But here's my point on that. Still don't want this information. Most people still don't want this information blabbed around the neighborhood or blabbed out to the other people. That's still family business. I think you have to give a qualifier to the kids. Hey, I'm going to tell you what's going on, but you got to keep your mouth shut. Please keep our private information private. Don't publicize that to the world. I think that's a fair request of the next generation. Some mistakes we make is asking questions not to find out what they will say, but to say what I wanted to say. And I do think we have to be very careful about that, because when we do things like this, we have to make sure that we are saying we are not saying what we wanted to say until we find out what they would say first. And if they ask you what you would say, then you can contribute, but otherwise don't cause trouble that way. I think a second communication mistake is that when I'm listening to someone, I make an assumption of what they'll say or what they're going to say. And that's a mistake I can make often here in the extension office, because I was in a county office for 30 years. And when people would call in, I would think that they were calling about ABC, and it turns out they were calling about XYZ. And so you have to really listen and figure out what their real problem is and work with them on that. And then the third point was thinking about how we will respond while the other person is talking. We're thinking about how we'll respond while the other person is talking. We'll be careful about that, because the bottom line is we have to listen first, and then we can give a response. But we have to make sure that we have proved to them that we are listening to them, because appreciation of their work is important to them, and they want to feel like they're a part of the family. So we have to show proper appreciation. We have to show proper affiliation. We have to give them proper status and all that sort of thing. We do that by listening. And then the last thing is we try and fix an issue without being asked. My children, my two children and my wife can drag me into making a mistake here all the time, because they'll talk about something that's happening to them. They'll just basically want to get something off their chest, something that's been bothering them. And as the dad or as the parent or as the parent or as the spouse, I want to try and fix it. I think the main thing is here, we have to understand that unless we're asked to fix something, we need to just listen, stay on the sidelines, show appreciation, and go on from there. Let me show you the next video to illustrate this point about trying to fix an issue without being asked, because that's a common mistake we can make if we're not careful.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't.
Try to see things my way.
So it's a function of making sure that when you're visiting with, especially with immediate family, and they want to just get something off their chest, you don't try and fix it for them unless you're asked to fix it. My son did to me recently, where he's complaining about something with his car, and I didn't say a word about what I thought he should do until he actually said, "Dad, what do you think I should do?" And then I told him, because that's when they're ready to listen. That works well. So anyway, somebody had a ha to that video, and so yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's the right thing to do. Negotiation. We negotiate all the time. We negotiate. We use cars. We negotiate with the grandkids. For me, it's grandkids, not kids. About, do you want a candy bar? You want a candy bar? We want a candy bar. Are you going to be a good grandpa, bad grandpa, that sort of thing? And we also have to negotiate with family. All I'm trying to say is negotiations, this is a back and forth process where we have both shared and opposed views. And the way we've been taught to negotiate is something like this. We have an extreme position on one end, where I go to price a used tractor, and the salesman goes, "Well, I want $50,000 for that tractor." And you say, "Well, today it's only worth $40,000. Come on, you're overpricing it because of the pandemic and everything else." And the salesman goes, "Well, I mean, it's worth that, and iron's worth a lot of money right now. But I tell you what, you're a good guy, and I've worked with you in the past. I'm going to work with you again. I'll let you have it for 48." And you go, "Well, I need to get going, but I tell you what, I'll give you. You offered it 40. I'll give you 42 for it." And then you go, "Well," and then the salesman goes, "Well, I got other people to see. I mean, other people are going to want that tractor, but I tell you what, you're a good guy, and I like you. I'll let you have it for 46. And your last offer is, hey, I got to go take care of cattle. We're calving. I got to get some feed out. We got to get everything checked over again before dark." And you offer 44, and then you make this split. You end up splitting the difference. Will you take 45? Yeah, I'll take 45, and you split the difference and walk out. That's the way most of us were taught to negotiate. My dad taught me that we had to negotiate by winning, and that's the way you felt like you won. And so we have to think about that very carefully. But how is that going to work with family? If family members going to be okay with we have a winner and two losers or something, whatever that looks like, I think that's a mistake. And I think we have to think through how we're going to create more value for family members to make sure that we treat family well, and everybody feels like they win. We have to create the winning. Oh, it's not about winning for one person. It's just how you create value for all parties, and it's a win-win deal. And by the way, about 80% of negotiation is good communication. Listen to what they'll say. You got to get out of the box. You got to get creative. You got to think about other options to what's going on, so that we can make all this thing work. I mean, I had one family that contacted me, and the son and the daughter-in-law were on the farm, a small farm, if you will. But there's a brother that was not a farmer, not interested in farming at all, but wanted to have part of the farm. He was, and to this son who goes, "Well, brother, why do you have to have part of the farm?" He goes, "Well, that's where I grew up, and that's where I want to hunt. I want to continue to be able to hunt." He wanted it mostly so he'd have the hunting rights. And so I suggested maybe that the on-farm kid and his wife should get the farm, but you also give your brother a hunting easement so that he could still hunt there. And you give him a hunting easement for the rest of his life. So he can still hunt there as much as he wants to the rest of his life during hunting season. And I don't know if that worked or not, but we're going to hope it did, because that's how we create more value, things like that. Get out of the box, get creative. Here's another way. I think I got time to show this. Here's another way we show value. Oh, I didn't put that in here. We're fine. So we have to think, we have to get creative. We have to think outside the box. And maybe it's a situation where we're going to delay payments or delay what everything's worth, or delay the true value of an operation until later, when that younger generation has more resources to be able to pay that note or that value off. So you just have to think about how you can delay, use labor now, get cash later, how that would work out for your family. So there's still a win-win, so that everything's still made whole for as many people as possible. I'm getting towards the end of my talk. I want to talk about one thing that we've tried to do here in Nebraska called LandLink. We started it just a year ago and 13 months ago, and we're trying to match land seekers who don't have access to land so they can farm with the older generation does not have a successor. And but they still want to see their operations continue. They want to see their operation exist as its own entity. And I think that's important. I think it's something that should be considered. And I think that, so that's what we're trying to create, is we're trying to create these matches. And so we're trying to create land seekers with landowners, and we're using online applications for all this sort of thing. And we're keeping the database quiet within ourselves, so we control who gets matched up with who. If you're interested in more about this, go to cap.unl.edu, look for LandLink. That's our website, the Center for Ag Profitability, University of Nebraska Lincoln. EDU is a domain name. And that's online information is there. I got videos there explaining what's going on. There's text there explaining what's going on, and applications at that website. If you don't have computer access, get a hold of me and I'll make sure that you get an application that's in a print form or a paper form. And if you got other questions, make sure you let me know as that process goes on. So I tried to talk about why we don't plan, the need for planning, and steps we can use for planning, how communication is the most important part of ag estate planning. And we can't use typical negotiation strategies to interfere with that planning. Hang on, let me see what I got here. Okay, am I done? Okay, hang on just a minute. Okay. Oh yeah, I am done. Okay, so now let me go back up here to the, just a minute. Let me go back up here to the chat. I purchased Nebraska farm ground as a non-operating landlord between marriages, and then purchased additional farm ground during my subsequent current marriage. How do I determine how the properties are owned in Nebraska? Well, you have all those things titled, and so you're going to have to go back to that title, and that's the only way I know of that you're going to be able to figure out how you own them, because you're going to have to look at how it got drawn up in the county or court where you filed all those things, or try and work with the lawyer to help you put all that together, or the realtor to help you put all that together. Somebody is going to be able to tell you how you own those things. You're going to have to just go back and try and find that paperwork for those transactions and figure out how you own them. I don't know what other questions you'd have, or I don't even know where this is coming from for sure. I'm not trying to dismiss it at all. I'm just trying to say you have to find the paperwork on that. Non-operating landlord between marriages, and then purchase additional farm ground during my subsequent current marriage. How do I determine how the properties are owned? You're going to have to look at your paperwork. I don't know how else to tell you to do that. Does that help? Or ask me another, type in another question. We got a few minutes, so I can answer more questions. If you got any questions at all, we can do it via Q&A or do it via the chat. I will stop my share right now. There we go. Oh, here we go. Here's one. Younger family member, what can I do to help encourage parents and grandparents to begin planning? Well, I think it's kind of back to where I started. I mean, certainly if you're not going to move them off a dead center, they're not going to move. But I think you need to appeal to your brothers and sisters to help you with this. But you're going to use the strategy that I tried to explain at the beginning of the program, basically saying, I'm going to say something to the effect of, listen, I don't want to have to be working on what's going to happen with this farm and these assets the day after your funeral. That's a bad time for us to do it, because we'll all be grieving, we'll all be sad, we'll all be, a lot of stress. Let's get to plan together right now. We're not trying to push, by the way, mom and dad, we're not trying to push you off the farm. We're not trying to get you to retire. We understand you're not going to do that anyway. But just let's think about what the plan would be. And maybe you start the conversation by saying, hey, so what is your plan? Maybe they've got something done already. Maybe they just haven't let you know. So ask that question first. What's your plan? And then ask the question of those kind of things. What do you want to have done with it? What would be your ideal? Maybe that's the second question. Since you don't have a plan, if they don't have one, what would you like to see happen to it? Who do you want to have this stuff? So I just have to figure that out. So to really simplify it, it's basically, I gave it to you in like 6 or 7 steps, but it's really just a 3-step process. One is, what do you have? What would you like to do with it? And then go to a lawyer or other professionals and make that happen. You don't have to worry about whether it's a trust or an LLC. But you take that to a lawyer and they will apply the right tool to make what you want to have happen. And I think far too many people don't complete the process because they don't know what they're asking for, and they think they have to have the LLC or the trust thing all figured out before they go see a lawyer. And I'm beginning to think, no, I don't want it that way. I want everybody to just know what they have, that complete inventory list. What would I like to do it ideally after you have a family meeting? And then what would I like to and then I take it to a lawyer, and a good lawyer will make that happen, or a good financial planner, or whoever you're working with that way. I hope that makes sense. I hope that I don't have that. I probably should put that in a summary slide, but it's just a 3-step process that we can make it easier than what we make it sometimes. And the main thing is continue to follow through. I see any other questions coming in. Anything else? Ryan, do you have a quick summary for us? We'll get off of here. We'll keep going.
Yeah, it looks like there is one more question in the chat, Alan. If you want to take a look, it looks like a follow-up.
Okay, counties. Okay, all right. County assessor, county clerk. You going to go to the county, not the assessor. You're going to go to the county register of deeds office, having a legal description. They will have the legal description on file there. You're going to go to the register of deeds. And some of like in Platte County, for instance, that's a separate office. In some counties, it can be combined with the assessor or anything like that. But you're not going to go to the attorney. You're going to go to the register of deeds office. That's where you want to go. I didn't see that till right now, but that's fine. We're cool.
All right, very good. If anybody has any last-minute questions, feel free to put them in here. In the chat box, I did place a link first for a quick 3-question survey. If you have a moment to complete that, just to give us feedback on our webinar series, that's extremely helpful, especially if you have any suggestions or requests for future topics in our webinars. Again, this series for our Center for Ag Profitability takes place every Thursday, usually at noon on those Thursdays. Next week, we'll be joined by Dave Aiken for a look at the 1923 South Platte River Compact and Nebraska water rights. And then coming up the following week, March 24th and 25th, we have a landlord-tenant cash rent workshop, actually 2 of those. One is geared toward Eastern Nebraska on the 24th, the other one towards Central and Western Nebraska. Allan will be part of that, along with Jim Jansen on our team. That will provide, among other things, a first look at 2022 land values and cash rental rates. It's about 2.5 hours long, I think, Allan, a pretty deep dive into a lot of land management issues for the year ahead for both landlords and tenants. So you can find information and registration on all of these, as well as a recording of today's webinar on our website, that's cap.unl.edu. And
the cool thing about the March 24, 25 thing is that Jim is going to have his preliminary results of the land value survey and the cash rent value survey available. He's working on his data files right now. He's going to pull that out, and he's going to show those numbers on those dates. So if you want to see the latest on cash rents and all that, that'll be available 24th, 25th.
All right. And seeing no other questions, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and especially Allan, thanks to you for putting this together for us. Again, you can look for the recording. It should be up by noon tomorrow if you want to revisit anything at cap.unl.edu/webinars. I see one more, a couple of notes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Perfect.
I think it's just a thanks. Okay, we're good. Thanks very much for being on, everybody. Appreciate it. All right.
Thanks, Allan. Everybody have a good one.
Thanks for having me. Talk later.